The auditorium buzzed with excitement. Rows of students in navy blue robes lined up with their tassels swinging proudly, the air thick with cheers, camera flashes, and the unmistakable scent of fresh roses that families clutched in celebration. Emma Collins clutched her diploma so tightly that her fingers trembled. This piece of paper wasn't just a certificate, it was proof of every sleepless night, every tear shed over tuition bills, every double shift at the diner to make rent while studying case law until dawn. She had done it. She had climbed the mountain. Through the blinding stage lights, Emma spotted her husband, Ethan Brooks, standing in the front row with that trademark confident smile plastered across his face. He had promised this moment would be the turning point of their lives. "When you graduate, we'll finally start the life we've always dreamed of," he'd whispered countless times during their late-night talks, when the pressure of law school threatened to crush her. She had believed him. She had believed in them. Emma's heart swelled as she stepped down the stage, diploma in hand. She expected a hug, maybe tears of pride. Instead, Ethan reached into his sleek black suit jacket and pulled out a crisp envelope. His hand extended toward her, not trembling, not nervous, calculated, steady. She blinked, confused. "What's this?" "Open it," he said flatly, his voice cutting through the joyful chatter around them. Her fingers fumbled with the flap. When she finally slid the papers out, her heart stopped. Divorce petition. The words blurred in her vision, sharp and cruel against the ivory page. What is this, Ethan?" Her voice cracked, barely audible, but the silence that fell around them made it sound like a scream. Her parents froze behind her, mouths slightly open. Her classmates glanced sideways, whispers already buzzing like mosquitoes in the air. Ethan didn't flinch. He tilted his head, his smirk widening. "You've outgrown me, Emma. Let's be honest, look at you now. Law degree. Ambition. You don't need me anymore. And," he paused deliberately, his gaze flicking toward the side of the room. "I've found someone better." Emma followed his glance. Her chest caved in. A tall woman in a striking red dress leaned casually against the exit doors, her glossy lips curved into a victorious smile. She didn't bother hiding. She didn't have to. Ethan's message was clear, he wasn't just leaving, he was replacing. Laughter. Not from the audience, not from strangers, from him. Ethan chuckled, low and cruel, shaking his head as if Emma's shock was some kind of comedy act. "Don't cry, Emma. You'll thank me someday." Tears stung her eyes. Her entire body screamed to collapse, to scream, to beg him not to do this. But Emma Collins had spent her entire life fighting battles no one thought she could win. At that moment, in front of hundreds of witnesses, she summoned every ounce of strength left inside her. She straightened her shoulders, tucked the divorce papers back into the envelope, and met Ethan's gaze head-on. Her hands no longer shook. "Fine," she said softly, but her voice carried with startling clarity. "If that's what you want, I won't stop you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ethan's smirk faltered for the briefest second, as if he'd expected her to break down, to plead. Instead, she gave him nothing. She turned, handed her diploma to her mother, and with the calmness of a seasoned attorney, though she had not yet practiced a day in her life, she signed her name across the dotted line on the divorce petition. The pen didn't waver. The humiliation was unbearable. She could feel the stares, the whispered pity, the judgment. The moment that was supposed to be the proudest of her life had been hijacked and twisted into a public execution of her marriage. Ethan wanted to reduce her to ashes. But deep inside, Emma made a silent vow, "This will not define me. This will not be the end of my story." She handed the signed papers back to Ethan, her eyes dry now, her voice steady. "Congratulations," she whispered, the words dripping with a venom he didn't yet recognize. "You just lost the best thing you ever had." Ethan blinked, startled, but quickly masked it with another laugh. He turned toward the woman in red, offering his arm as if he were some triumphant hero walking off stage. The two of them strutted out of the auditorium together, basking in the shocked silence they left behind. Emma remained rooted to the spot, surrounded by murmurs, cameras flashing not in celebration but in scandal. She didn't shed another tear, not then. She stood taller, clutching the diploma that symbolized her survival, her grit, her worth. Everyone thought they were witnessing her downfall. What they didn't know was that they had just witnessed the birth of her greatest transformation. Because Emma Collins didn't crumble. She disappeared. And when she came back, she would rise higher than anyone, especially Ethan, could ever imagine. The cheers of graduation faded into an uneasy murmur as Emma walked out of the auditorium, the envelope pressed to her chest like a brand burned into her skin. Her parents tried to console her, their arms hovering protectively at her sides, but she shook them off gently. She didn't want pity. Not tonight. Ethan, however, wanted the world to watch. Outside, under the wide white canopy where families gathered for photos, Ethan strutted like a celebrity. His arm was already wrapped around the woman in the red dress, her heels clicking sharply against the concrete. She clung to him as though she'd won a prize, flashing her diamond bracelet at every camera that caught their path. Emma could feel the stares, the pity, the cruel curiosity. Strangers whispered behind their hands. "That's the wife. The one he left at graduation." Her classmates, people who had once studied late into the night with her, cramming for exams and leaning on her notes, avoided her eyes. No one wanted to be too close to a spectacle. No one wanted to touch the humiliation. Emma walked past them, head high, her graduation cap tucked tightly under her arm. Each step felt like dragging chains, but she forced her chin up. She refused to let Ethan see her crumble. "Emma." The sound of his voice stopped her cold. She turned. Ethan stood just a few feet away, his new lover still glued to his side. He smiled as if this were nothing but a minor inconvenience, a bump in his perfect narrative. "Don't be mad, sweetheart. You'll find someone at your level. A big-shot lawyer, maybe. Someone who won't mind your long nights or your baggage." His eyes darted to her parents, dismissing them with a sneer. Laughter bubbled from his chest, real laughter, cruel and sharp. The woman in red joined in, tilting her head against his shoulder like a mocking echo. Emma's cheeks burned, but not from shame. From fury. She swallowed hard, steadying her breathing. If she let them see her cry, it would be their victory. If she stayed silent, her dignity remained intact. So she did the unthinkable. She smiled. A small, sharp, razor-thin smile. "You're right, Ethan," she said, her voice calm, almost eerily so. "You found what you were looking for. And so will I." The words hung between them, delicate yet lethal. For the first time, Ethan's grin faltered. He had expected a scene. He had expected begging, tears, maybe even a dramatic slap. What he didn't expect was Emma's refusal to play his game. She turned away, her gown sweeping across the concrete, her diploma pressed tightly against her side like a shield. Every camera in the courtyard caught the moment, the jilted wife walking away, not broken, but composed. Yet inside, Emma's soul screamed. Every beat of her heart echoed with betrayal. The humiliation burrowed deep, etching itself into her memory, a scar she knew would never fade. That night, back at her small apartment, she laid the diploma on her desk. Beside it sat the signed divorce petition, its edges still crisp. She stared at the two papers side by side, one symbolizing triumph, the other devastation. She picked up a pen and wrote on the back of the divorce copy. "This is not the end. This is the beginning." Then she folded it neatly, slid it into a drawer, and began packing a suitcase. She didn't tell her parents where she was going. She didn't answer messages from friends. She didn't post a single photo from graduation. To the world, Emma Collins vanished overnight, swallowed by the shadows of betrayal. And as Ethan paraded his new relationship online, basking in likes and comments, convinced she was broken and forgotten, Emma disappeared with a vow burning in her chest. One day, the man who had laughed at her tears would choke on his own. Because humiliation wasn't the end of her story. It was the fuel that would ignite her rise. The city lights blurred against the car window as Emma Collins sat in the back of a cab, her suitcase balanced on her lap. The driver tried making small talk. Graduation day, huh? Must be exciting. But Emma only nodded, her throat too tight to answer. Exciting wasn't the word. Devastating. Shattering. Humiliating. She had left her keys on the kitchen counter of her tiny apartment, slid the envelope with Ethan's divorce petition into her bag, and walked out without looking back. She didn't owe anyone explanations, not her classmates, not her friends, not even her parents. She needed distance. She needed silence. Most of all, she needed to vanish. That night, Emma boarded a midnight bus out of town. She didn't tell a soul where she was headed. No tearful calls, no social media posts begging for sympathy. She simply disappeared, leaving behind nothing but rumors. Ethan's version of the story took over quickly. On Instagram, he posted a photo of himself and the woman in red, her name was Vanessa, clinking champagne glasses at an upscale restaurant. The caption read, "New beginnings. Some people can't keep up with growth." Hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments. His friends cheered him on. Strangers gushed over how gorgeous Vanessa looked. No one asked where Emma was, no one questioned how brutal the timing had been. To the world, Ethan had upgraded, and Emma had simply faded into the background. In reality, Emma was anything but broken. The first few weeks were hell. She rented a room in a rundown boarding house 2 states away, working temp jobs during the day and poring over law journals at night. Every dollar she earned went to bar prep courses, every ounce of energy funneled into one goal, passing the bar and becoming an attorney. She didn't cry over Ethan. Not anymore. Every time his face surfaced in her mind, every time she remembered his laugh echoing in that auditorium, Emma turned the pain into fuel. She woke up earlier. She studied harder. She pushed herself further. Back in her old city, Ethan and Vanessa flaunted their life like a soap opera. Tropical vacations. Designer clothes. Lavish parties. They made sure everyone knew Emma had been left behind. And people believed it. She must be devastated, they whispered. She'll never recover from that kind of humiliation. She'll always be the girl he dumped at graduation. But Emma didn't hear the whispers. She was too busy rewriting her future. Months blurred into a year. Then another. Slowly, Emma built a new identity brick by brick, one victory at a time. She passed the bar exam. She got her first job at a modest but respectable law firm. She learned to command a courtroom, her voice steady, her presence sharp. The shy girl who once worked double shifts to pay for textbooks was gone. In her place stood a woman who carried herself with quiet power. A woman who no longer needed anyone's approval, least of all Ethan's. By the time she moved to New York City, Emma Collins was a ghost to her old life. No one knew where she had gone. Ethan never bothered to search. In his mind, she had been erased, reduced to a footnote in his story. But the truth was far different. Emma wasn't erased. She was sharpening her edges. She was laying the foundation for a comeback so spectacular it would leave him breathless. For years would pass before their paths crossed again. By then, Ethan Brooks would no longer be the man who laughed so easily, who strutted so confidently with Vanessa on his arm. His empire would crumble. His charm would fade. His smile would rot into bitterness. And Emma, oh, Emma would shine. Because while Ethan thought she had disappeared, she had only been preparing for her return. For years. To Ethan Brooks, they crawled by like a slow, grinding punishment. At first, life with Vanessa was intoxicating. The woman in the red dress brought him into her glittering world of rooftop parties, exclusive clubs, and luxury trips. Together, they posted photo after photo, kissing on beaches, sipping champagne in Paris, wrapped in designer clothes that screamed success. For a while, Ethan believed he had made the right choice. He was finally living the life he thought Emma could never give him. But champagne runs dry. Red dresses lose their shine. And people who fall in love with vanity eventually fall out of it too. By the second year, the cracks showed. Ethan's business ventures, half-baked startups, impulsive investments, bled money. His so-called friends stopped inviting him to their dinners when the checks bounced. The confidence that once made him magnetic began to look like desperation. Vanessa, ever the opportunist, noticed. She had signed up for a man on the rise, not one stumbling toward failure. Slowly, her smiles grew tighter, her absences longer, until one morning she simply didn't come home at all. On the kitchen counter, Ethan found a note scrawled in lipstick. "I didn't sign up for broke. Don't call me." She never looked back. For the first time, Ethan was alone. Truly alone. The man who once relished attention now found himself scrolling through old contacts, ignored by people who had once laughed at his jokes and clinked glasses at his table. His bank account shrank, his debts piled, and the apartment he had once decorated with Vanessa's taste grew darker and emptier by the day. And then, one night, flipping channels in his dingy living room, he saw her. Emma. Not the broken wife he had abandoned. Not the humiliated woman clutching papers at graduation. No, this Emma was radiant. She sat across from a news anchor on national television, wearing a sharp navy suit, her posture confident, her smile controlled but warm. The headline flashed across the screen. Emma Collins, New York Attorney of the Year. Recognized for resilience and excellence in law. Ethan dropped the remote. His chest tightened, his mouth suddenly dry. She was supposed to be forgotten. Erased. Nothing without him. But here she was, shining brighter than he ever had, her name celebrated across the country. The crowd in the interview clapped when she spoke about perseverance, about fighting for justice, about never letting life's blows define you. Ethan heard the words, and each one landed like a stone in his gut. He thought about graduation day, the way she had stared at him, broken but unyielding, before signing those papers. He thought about how easily he had laughed, how certain he was that she would never recover. But now, on the screen, Emma's eyes burned with the fire of someone who had rebuilt herself from ashes. For the first time, Ethan understood the truth, he hadn't outgrown her. She had outgrown him. And in that moment, regret began to eat him alive. It started as a whisper, call her. Reach out. She might forgive you. But it grew into an obsession. He looked her up online, scrolling through every photo, every article, every accolade. She was untouchable now, her office in Manhattan, her name in legal circles, her image tied to words like fearless and brilliant. Meanwhile, Ethan Brooks was drowning. His debts called daily, his landlord threatened eviction, and the only thing that filled his empty nights was whiskey and silence. One evening, in a drunken haze, he dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. Again. And again. Over the next 2 months, Ethan Brooks called Emma Collins 420 times. She never picked up. Not once. It happened on a rainy Thursday in Manhattan. Ethan Brooks had come into the city for a half-hearted meeting with a potential investor, though in truth he had nothing left to offer. His suit was wrinkled, his shoes scuffed, and his confidence, once his most reliable weapon, was long gone. He trudged through the lobby of a gleaming high-rise, head down, avoiding the sharp reflections of men who still had their lives together. And then he froze. Across the lobby, surrounded by colleagues and assistants, walked a woman who seemed to radiate light in the dimness of his world. Tall, Poised, her hair swept into a sleek bun, she wore a black tailored suit that seemed carved to perfection. People leaned in as she spoke, laughing at her remarks, nodding with admiration. Emma. For a moment, Ethan thought he was hallucinating. The rainwater dripping from his hair, the exhaustion in his body, it all made him doubt his eyes. But no, it was her. The woman he had once left crumpled in the ashes of humiliation now glided across marble floors like she owned the building. He almost called her name, but the sound stuck in his throat. What would he say? Emma, remember me? The man who mocked you, betrayed you, discarded you. She hadn't noticed him. And maybe that was the worst wound of all. He wasn't even worth a glance. Instead, Emma handed her briefcase to an assistant and pressed the elevator button. The doors opened, and before stepping inside, she laughed at something one of her colleagues said. That laugh, it was confident, unbroken, a melody he hadn't heard in years. Then she was gone. Ethan stood rooted to the floor, soaked in rain, his chest hollow. It wasn't just the shock of seeing her. It was the brutal clarity that came with it. Emma hadn't just survived without him, she had soared. She had become someone untouchable, someone he no longer had the right to approach. But obsession doesn't care about rights. That night, Ethan searched every article, every interview, every mention of Emma Collins he could find. Photos of her at charity galas, her name on the covers of legal magazines, her victories in high-profile cases. She wasn't just thriving, she was admired, respected, envied. And Ethan? He was a ghost, reduced to debt and regret. The image of her in that lobby haunted him. He replayed it endlessly, the curve of her smile, the way people orbited around her like she was gravity itself. He imagined what it would feel like to stand at her side again, to bask in her brilliance. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't laugh. He couldn't. The only sound that filled his nights was the hollow buzz of his phone as he dialed her number again and again. But Emma never answered. The first time Ethan dialed her number, his hands shook. Not from nerves, but from the raw ache of wanting to undo 4 years in a single conversation. He rehearsed what he would say. Emma, I was wrong. Emma, I miss you. Emma, give me one more chance. The call went straight to voicemail. He hung up. Tried again. Straight to voicemail. By the 10th call, his throat burned with frustration. By the 20th, shame crept in. By the 50th, shame no longer mattered. Over the next 2 months, Ethan Brooks became a man possessed. Morning, noon, and night, he called. Sometimes with slurred words after too many drinks. Sometimes with practiced lines, begging her secretary to pass on the message. Sometimes with nothing more than silence, just to hear the faint echo of her voicemail greeting before the beep. 420 calls. Every single one unanswered. Emma Collins never picked up, not once. At first, Ethan told himself she was busy. A successful attorney in Manhattan couldn't possibly have time for her phone. But deep down, he knew the truth. She saw his name and chose silence. Silence was her verdict, and it cut deeper than words. Each unanswered call chipped away at him. He stopped sleeping, lying awake with his phone clutched in his hand, staring at her contact photo, the one he hadn't changed since their marriage, back when her smile was softer, when she had loved him without hesitation. He imagined her seeing his number and rolling her eyes, maybe even laughing the way he once had. The irony was poison. He had laughed when she cried. Now she was silent while he begged. His apartment became a shrine to regret. Empty bottles stacked on the counter. Past due bills scattered on the table. The glow of his phone lit the dark rooms at night as he watched her televised interviews on repeat, studying every flicker of her smile, every tilt of her chin. The more she ignored him, the more desperate he became. He left voicemails, sometimes sobbing, sometimes angry, sometimes whispering apologies into the void. Emma, please, just hear me out. I was a fool. I ruined everything. You don't understand, I need you. But Emma understood perfectly. Her silence wasn't ignorance. It was power. It was her way of showing him that he no longer had access to her world, her time, her life. 420 missed calls later, Ethan realized something chilling. He hadn't just lost Emma. He had lost the version of himself who could have kept her. That man, the one she once believed in, was long gone. Now, he was nothing more than a ghost on her phone screen, a name she would never answer again. And that realization drove him to the edge of obsession. If Emma wouldn't come to him, he would go to her. It was a rainy Thursday when Ethan finally snapped. The 421st call went to voicemail like all the others, and something inside him shattered. His desperation hardened into a decision: if Emma wouldn't answer, he'd force the conversation face to face. He shaved for the first time in weeks, put on the least wrinkled shirt he could find, and rehearsed his plea in the cracked mirror of his bathroom. Just 5 minutes, Emma. Give me 5 minutes. By the time he reached the glass tower in Midtown, his heart was pounding so loud he thought the security guard at the front desk could hear it. Name? The guard asked. Ethan Brooks. I'm here to see Emma Collins. The guard didn't even glance up. Do you have an appointment? Ethan forced a smile. No, but she'll want to see me. The guard finally looked at him, unimpressed. That's not how it works, sir. Panic clawed at Ethan's chest. He wasn't about to be turned away after coming this far. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Tell her it's her husband. The guard raised an eyebrow. Ex-husband. The correction stung more than a slap. Before Ethan could argue, the elevator doors slid open behind him. And there she was. Emma Collins. She looked even more untouchable in person than on the TV screen. A navy suit tailored to perfection, her hair swept back in a sleek bun, her heels clicking like punctuation against the marble floor. She was flanked by 2 colleagues, mid-conversation, her laughter light and easy, until her eyes landed on him. The laughter died instantly. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. For years of silence, 420 unanswered calls, and now here she was, so close he could reach out and touch her. Emma, he whispered. Her gaze sharpened, the softness he remembered replaced by steel. She turned to her colleagues with effortless composure. Give me a moment, she said, her voice cool. They stepped aside, and for the first time in years, it was just the 2 of them. You shouldn't be here, Emma said flatly. Please, Ethan begged, his voice cracking. Just 5 minutes. I've made mistakes, but I've changed. I need you to hear me out. Emma crossed her arms, eyes narrowing. Changed? You called me 420 times, Ethan. That's not change. That's obsession. Her words hit like daggers, but he pressed on. I was a fool. I threw away the best thing in my life. But I'm sober now, I'm working on myself, She cut him off with a sharp laugh, bitter and cold. Working on yourself? Do you know what I was working on while you were drunk, while you were cheating, while you were laughing at my pain? My career. My life. My future. Ethan's lips trembled. I just want another chance. Emma stepped closer, her heels clicking like a countdown. Her voice dropped, low and final. You don't get another chance, Ethan. You had your chance when I was begging you to love me. You had your chance when I cried myself to sleep. You had your chance when I was still stupid enough to believe you'd change. And you laughed. Her eyes glistened for the briefest second, but she blinked the tears away before they could fall. Then she straightened, cold as stone. Now it's my turn to laugh. And with that, Emma turned her back on him, walking away without hesitation. The sound of her heels echoed in the marble lobby, each step a reminder that she was untouchable, unreachable, and gone. For the first time, Ethan realized the truth: Emma wasn't his anymore. She never would be. But obsession doesn't die easily. And Ethan wasn't ready to let go. Ethan didn't leave the lobby right away. He stood there, staring at the elevators long after Emma disappeared, until the guard finally cleared his throat and said, "Sir, it's time to go." He walked out into the rain, numb, but the storm inside him was louder than the thunder above. He had thought seeing Emma would bring relief, some kind of closure. Instead, her words carved new wounds. "Now it's my turn to laugh." The sentence echoed in his skull like a curse. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat on the floor of his apartment surrounded by old photo albums, their plastic sleeves fogged with fingerprints and spilled whiskey from years ago. Every smiling picture of Emma felt like a ghost haunting him. At 3 a.m., he opened his laptop and searched her name. Within seconds, articles, interviews, and conference recordings appeared. Emma Collins, the rising star of corporate law. Emma Collins, guest lecturer at Columbia. Emma Collins, advocate for women's rights in the workplace. Her face was everywhere. Her voice, confident and commanding, filled his dark apartment. And Ethan, hunched over the screen, devoured it all. Day by day, his routine shifted. He stopped looking for work. He stopped answering his mother's calls. Instead, he studied Emma. Every article, every TV appearance, every LinkedIn update. He knew where she spoke, which cases she argued, who she was photographed with at gala dinners. It was obsession dressed as research. One evening, Ethan followed her. He waited outside her office building, watching from across the street as she stepped into a black car with tinted windows. His chest tightened as he saw her driver open the door for her. She didn't even glance around, didn't notice him. She looked untouchable, like a queen in her fortress. He trailed the car on foot, then by subway, until it stopped at an upscale restaurant. From the window, he saw her sitting across from a man in a tailored suit, their conversation animated, laughter spilling between sips of wine. Ethan's hands curled into fists inside his pockets. His jaw ached from clenching. Who is he? A colleague? A date? The thought of Emma moving on, laughing with another man, twisted his insides until he felt physically sick. That night, back in his apartment, he smashed a glass against the wall. The shards glittered on the floor like the remnants of his pride. He muttered into the silence, "She doesn't get to laugh. Not after what she did. Not after she left me with nothing." And just like that, Ethan crossed a line. It was no longer about winning her back. It was about making sure she remembered him. Even if it destroyed them both. Ethan's obsession was like quicksand. The more he fought against it, the deeper he sank. Weeks blurred into months. His bank account bled dry. He sold his watch, his car, even his late father's guitar, just to pay the rent on his crumbling apartment. But none of it mattered, because Emma was everywhere. Every time he turned on the television, she appeared on the news, standing tall in a courtroom, her words quoted like gospel. On social media, her name trended beside words like fearless and trailblazer. Meanwhile, Ethan's own name was tied to failure. Former business partners accused him of fraud. Old friends stopped returning his calls. Even the woman he had left Emma for, the one who had seemed like a golden ticket, had vanished, taking what was left of his money with her. One evening, Ethan walked into a bar he used to frequent. The moment he stepped in, conversations faltered. A group of men at the counter, once his drinking buddies, glanced at him, then whispered. He heard the words pathetic and washed up. He left before ordering a drink. At home, the silence was suffocating. The walls closed in, stained by water leaks and cigarette smoke. The once proud man who had mocked Emma now stared into a cracked mirror, seeing only a hollow-eyed stranger. And yet, even in ruin, he couldn't stop thinking about her. One rainy afternoon, Ethan scrolled through his phone and saw a headline, prominent lawyer Emma Collins engaged to Dr. Alexander Hayes, esteemed surgeon. The photo below stole the breath from his chest. Emma, radiant in a sleek navy dress, her hand resting on the arm of a man who exuded quiet power. The diamond on her finger glittered like a declaration: she had moved on, completely and forever. Ethan threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, but the image was seared into his mind. That night, he drank until dawn, muttering to himself, cursing Emma, cursing the man beside her, cursing fate itself. Yet beneath all the rage was something worse, raw, aching regret. The same man who once laughed at her tears now found himself weeping alone in the dark. His empire was gone. His pride was gone. His future was gone. And Emma. Emma was untouchable. It was raining the night Ethan reached Emma's house. Not a gentle drizzle, but a relentless storm that drenched him the moment he stepped out of the taxi. His thin coat clung to his skin, his shoes sloshed with every step, but he didn't care. He had nothing left to lose. Emma's townhouse stood proudly on a quiet New York street, its warm lights glowing through tall windows. From the outside, it looked like a life he could have had, a life he threw away. He climbed the steps, water streaming down his face, and pounded on the door. Emma. His voice cracked against the thunder. Please, please open the door. For a moment, there was nothing but the roar of rain. Then the door opened, and there she was. Emma stood in the doorway, wrapped in a cream-colored robe, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. Behind her, the faint clinking of glasses and the low hum of music hinted at a peaceful evening. But when she saw Ethan, her expression didn't flicker with sympathy, only cool, sharp recognition. "Ethan," she said flatly. He dropped to his knees, the water splashing around him. His voice trembled. "Emma, please. I can't do this anymore. I can't live without you." His hands pressed together, desperate, shaking. "I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. Just give me one more chance. I'll do anything. I'll change." Emma's eyes were steady, her face unreadable. She let the silence hang until his sobs filled the night air. Finally, she leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but cutting. "You had me once. And you threw me away. You don't get to want me back." Ethan reached for her, his fingers brushing the threshold, but she stepped back, away from his touch. Through the doorway, he caught sight of a tall figure entering the room, a man in a dark sweater, carrying 2 mugs of tea. The surgeon. Alexander Hayes. He placed a protective arm around Emma's shoulder, his gaze cold and unyielding as it landed on Ethan. "Close the door," Alexander said quietly. Emma held Ethan's eyes for one last moment. There was no hatred in her gaze, only finality. Then she shut the door. The lock clicked into place. Ethan collapsed against the steps, rain pounding on his bowed head, his body racked with sobs. The street was empty, save for the broken man kneeling alone in the storm. The same man who once laughed at Emma's tears now drowned in his own. The storm didn't last forever, but Ethan's misery did. By morning, the rain had passed, leaving the streets washed clean, but he remained on the steps long after Emma had gone to bed. His body was stiff, his clothes reeked of damp and whiskey, and yet he couldn't bring himself to move. When the sun rose, neighbors passed by, glancing at him with pity or disdain. He was no longer the confident man who once strutted through town with a new woman on his arm. He was a shadow, a ruin. Finally, he staggered home. His apartment smelled of mildew and stale liquor. The walls seemed to close in tighter with every day. Bills piled up unopened. His phone, cracked from when he'd thrown it, no longer lit up with messages, except for spam and debt collectors. And worst of all, the silence was absolute. Ethan had once thought Emma's absence would mean freedom. Instead, it was a sentence, a punishment heavier than chains. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her walking across the graduation stage, saw himself shoving divorce papers into her hands, heard his own cruel words, "You've outgrown me. I've found someone better." Now those words mocked him, gnawed at him until he screamed just to drown them out. One evening, he found himself wandering to the old university campus. The graduation hall loomed ahead, its brick walls glowing in the setting sun. Students in gowns and parents with cameras bustled past him, laughing, celebrating, living. Ethan stood at the edge, invisible. Forgotten. He saw in his mind that day years ago, the applause, the flash of cameras, Emma's radiant smile dimming as he destroyed her in front of everyone. He had thought himself powerful then. But in truth, he had written his own downfall with that single act of cruelty. And now, he finally understood. Emma hadn't needed to punish him. Life had done it for her. She had risen. And he had rotted. With trembling hands, Ethan sank onto the cold stone steps outside the hall. He pressed his palms over his face, but it couldn't hide the tears. The once proud man who mocked his wife's dreams now sat as nothing more than a cautionary tale, a husk of wasted potential and squandered love. Karma had sealed his fate. Weeks after that stormy night, Emma hardly thought of Ethan anymore. Her life was too full, too rich, too forward-looking. The wedding invitations had been sent, her law firm was expanding, and she had just been nominated for a national award recognizing women who had broken barriers in their fields. On the evening of the ceremony, Emma stood backstage in a sleek black gown, the same calm strength in her eyes that had carried her through every trial. When her name was called, the audience erupted in applause. She stepped onto the stage, the lights dazzling, the room filled with faces turned toward her. Emma accepted the award with a steady hand, then approached the microphone. Her voice was clear, unwavering. "For years ago," she began, "I was told I wasn't enough. That I didn't deserve love, respect, or even loyalty. That moment nearly broke me. But instead of letting it define me, I chose to fight. I chose to rebuild. And tonight, I stand here as proof that no one, not a partner, not a betrayal, not even your darkest moment, can decide your worth but you." The room was silent, hanging on her every word. Emma smiled softly, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "So if you've ever been abandoned, belittled, or betrayed, remember this: you are not the pain someone inflicted on you. You are the strength that rises after. Never let anyone make you forget that." The applause thundered through the hall, rising to its feet. Cameras flashed, capturing Emma's luminous figure on stage, her chin lifted high, her eyes alight with victory. Somewhere across the city, in a dark apartment reeking of failure, Ethan watched the broadcast alone. The glow of the television illuminated his hollow face as Emma's words echoed in his empty room. He could not look away. And for the first time, Ethan realized the truth. He was no longer a chapter in her story. He was only a warning. Emma, meanwhile, stepped off the stage into the arms of the man who loved her, her future wide open, her past firmly behind her. She didn't look back. She never would. Because her story was no longer about survival. It was about triumph.